Hello and welcome. My name's Diana Sweeney and I'm one of the directors for Compass UK and Ireland. And it is my absolute pleasure to host this session today. So today I am joined by a wonderful panel of experts who will be talking today about male incontinence in the workplace, a topic that is rarely spoken about but affects millions of men worldwide. So back in May, this all started by Leanne King, our Head of Nutrition and Wellbeing, joined by one of our panellists today at a wellbeing forum. Before that meeting began, another attendee raised the topic and asked what could be done to address it. As discussions unfolded, it became clear that at a table of 8 people, nearly every attendee could identify at least one man whose life had been affected by incontinence. This resonated deeply. After further reflection and a real determination to make a difference, the Let's Talk About Leaks campaign was born. And there's no better time to launch it than during Men's Health Month. Statistics show that up to 1 in 10 men over 40 experience bladder leaks, yet many don't seek help due to embarrassment or stigma. Younger men are not exempt. In fact, studies show that mental health impact is particularly severe amongst those under 25. Today, our goal is to break the silence, bust the myths and explore how workplaces can support men, whether that's through policies, practical adjustments, nutrition, occupational health, or open dialogue. Our aim for today is to leave you with actionable insights, whether you're supporting a colleague, shaping workplace policy, or managing your own health. So let's start by meeting our panel. I'm delighted that joining us today are experts across health, safety, HR, and workplace management. To break the ice, let's go around the screen. Please introduce yourselves and share what inspired you to join the panel today. So Paul, let's kick off with you.
Hi, Diana. So I'm Paul Litchfield. I'm Compass's independent chief medical advisor. What inspired me to join the panel today? Well, I was asked, and being a man of a certain age, I suppose it resonates particularly with me. So it is an important issue, and I'm glad that the company has taken the time and trouble to address it.
Fantastic. Jason, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi Dana, and hi all. Yes, probably similar to Paul, really. A man of a certain age, these things start to crop up, and especially, with a wide friendship group as well of a similar age. So, and I just think it was important that we start to sort of focus on things like this, because quite often men can sort of be a little bit reticent when it comes to talking about their health, and I felt it's good to try and start to get involved and break down barriers.
Fantastic, thank you. Gillian, let's bring in the woman's perspective into this if we can.
Hi, my name is Gillian Simpson. I'm one of the programme delivery managers with Step Change and Safety. And it came, so male incontinence came to my attention whilst we were at a wellbeing work group meeting. So Step Change and Safety has work groups on about different aspects of health and safety, and an HSE inspector raised this issue about just how prevalent it was. And it's not something that I had ever really considered. I'm not aware of anyone in my family who had it, but that's not to say that it didn't happen, because it just isn't spoken about. So when we got to discuss it and think about it a bit more, I thought, well, I know someone of working age and I know someone of retired age. Actually, I do know people, and it's just not spoken about, and it causes, I think, such anxiety and stress, and it doesn't need to be that difficult for people.
Yeah, precisely. So Laura, what about your perspective?
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Coombe. I'm a key account manager for Initial Washroom Hygiene. I've been in the business as a washroom account manager for about 12 months. I've previously come from the pest control side. From a personal point of view, male incontinence really resonates with me on a personal level. I grew up with a dad who had Crohn's disease. So, he's 67 now, but at the time when I was growing up, he would have been in his early 30s. And it was an absolutely crippling disease for him, which has affected him all through his adult life up until this point. So I'm really passionate about making sure that we have the facilities in the workplace that cover all genders and all people.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for all of you for joining us today. So look, why don't we jump straight in? And Paul, if I begin with you, we've seen the data and heard statistics around male incontinence, but behind those numbers, there are some real experiences. And I think we've already just started to hear that with Laura. From your perspective, can you tell us a bit more about the medical and well-being factors that contribute to male incontinence and why it might be more common than many people realise?
Yeah, so there are four main types of urinary incontinence that can affect men, and they're related to the different underlying causes of the problem. So the first of those is urge incontinence, and that's the commonest type in men. It's a sign of an overactive bladder, and it relates to the leakage that often occurs when you experience a sudden and intense sensation to pass water. The second type is stress incontinence, and that's leakage that occurs when the bladder is squeezed by pressure on the abdomen, on the tummy, and that can be caused by activities like sneezing, coughing, laughing, lifting heavy objects. It's generally a sign of weak pelvic floor muscles, or it can be a side effect of surgery. The third type is called overflow incontinence, and that's the dribbling that occurs when the bladder can't empty completely, either because there's an obstruction, which is usually an enlarged prostate gland, or because of nerve damage. And then the fourth type is functional incontinence, and that's the type of incontinence where the plumbing, if I can use that term, is normal, but the person can't reach the toilet in time because of a separate disabling condition. Of course, some unfortunate individuals will have a mix of those different types of incontinence. Now, the commonest underlying reason for male incontinence is a problem with the prostate gland. The prostate is an organ that produces seminal fluid in semen, and it sits just below the bladder and wraps around the urethra, which is the pipe, the tube that the urine flows through going down the penis. And the prostate gland is about the size of a walnut in young men, but as we get older, it gets larger. And as it gets larger, it both compresses that urethra, that emptying pipe from the bladder, so the urine flow is less, and it also presses on the base of the bladder. And that bit of the bladder at the bottom there is the bit that sends the signal to the brain that you want to pee. So you've got less liquid flowing through, and you feel the urge to pee more often. And so as we get older, men generally need to pee more often than they did when they were younger, and their urine stream is weaker. And they may also experience leaks, especially urge or overflow incontinence. Now, most enlargement of the prostate is of a benign type. In other words, it's not cancer, it just gets bigger. But you can also get, as a man, get prostate cancer, and that can also cause the gland to grow and cause symptoms which again include urinary incontinence. So in particular, men who have a family history of prostate cancer, come from a black ethnic background, or over 50, all of those are at higher risk of prostate cancer. So if you've got those symptoms of leakage that I was talking about, then you, and particularly if you fall into one of those three groups, you should talk to your GP, and your GP will want to exclude the possibility of cancer as well as other serious remediable conditions.
Thank you, Paul. Look, I think that is a really good point for me that I've just picked up on, is to not, if you're experiencing symptoms, don't just be embarrassed about it and don't just ignore them, because it could be something that ultimately not only improves your life if those symptoms can be recoverable away, but actually saves your life if it is something more critical and under there. So I would urge everyone to that's listening to make sure that you do speak up and seek medical support, because it could literally be life-saving. So thank you for that, Paul. Laura, if I can come to you next. I know Initial has carried out research into male incontinence in the workplace. Can you share some of the key findings and what they reveal about how widespread this issue actually is?
Thanks, Dana. So we carried out in 2022 as part of our Stalls for All campaign, a snapshot of 900 UK males in a workplace setting. So I just want to stress that it is only 900 males that we captured in that 24-hour period. It was done through an online survey. So the scale of it in the UK is that the NHS advised that 14 million people can suffer from bladder problems and 6.5 million from bowel issues. So this is just a very small snapshot, but the key takeaways from that was 50% of people in that survey said that they felt afraid to leave their homes. So potentially there's an avenue there that not having provision in the workplace could potentially keep people off work. And again, as I've stated about my father growing up, I grew up with that. I remember days when we couldn't go out and do the things that we enjoyed because he just physically wasn't able to be that far away from a toilet with no provision for him to dispose of his sanitary products. I think 300 of the 900 people that we surveyed as well openly admitted, and these are the ones that were prepared to admit it, admitted to carrying around a used incontinence pad or their underwear in their pocket after an incident when they've been out in a public place. And that's just a snapshot of 30% of 900 people. So if you think the scale of it over 20 million people in the UK, 49% of the population are men. So for me, that 900 is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're dealing with and how comfortable people feel opening up about it and making it a normal part of the conversation. For me, it was an everyday conversation in our house. It's just how me and my sister were brought up. It was very much open and discussed. But outside of that, how comfortable would he have felt as a 35-year-old man in his workplace at the time, discussing his issues with his boss or human resources? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for sharing such a personal story. I can see that it's something you're very passionate about, and quite rightly so. Look, I think it's leads us well into the workplace. I would like to hope that, you know, your dad's 30 years older now, that perhaps the world has changed a bit and it's improved, but I suspect that's not always the case. So Jason, let's explore from an HR perspective. How can organisations start to open up this conversation in a really supportive way while maintaining that sensitivity and privacy? Because it is a difficult subject, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think you touched. I'd like to think that we've moved on a lot in the years, as Laura said, about 30 years. However, I think, you know, that is still a subject that is sensitive to a lot of men, and therefore they don't talk at it. So I think things like today will help that, you know, by raising an awareness and breaking down some of the taboos, because as we know, stereotypically men get labelled as unable to talk about health issues. I think this is improving, you know, especially around things like mental health. However, I think things like this still don't get discussed. So I think what we need to try and do is break down those taboos, and, you know, and there's more we need to do around that. I think from a work perspective, I think we need to look to have supportive policies on that. And we're currently working on policies that will, you know, particularly tackle this particular subject. And we hope to have that ready and introduced very soon. But I think it's about building the trust in the workplace where men can feel confident to talk to their manager about these things, you know, remove the stigma. You know, as we've already heard on here, it's a massive impact on people's day-to-day lives. You know, we can't underestimate how that can feel. And I think you alluded to it, Diana, you know, how many people also then don't feel able to come into work. And that's all because, you know, there's this fear or embarrassment around that subject. So I think, you know, let's build a place where actually people feel they can trust, it's confidential, they're not going to be judged, they're not going to be, you know, mocked, and actually they're, you know, what their issue is taken seriously, and we look to help.
Thank you, Jason. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It makes me think, actually, I was in a meeting with a range of colleagues fairly recently, and we were talking about the menopause rather than incontinence. And actually, the men really joined in and were very open about sharing how they felt that this could help them because of their partners, etc. at home. But actually, it does strike me that, you know, menopause is becoming much more of a common subject in the workplace for discussion. But I certainly, before, you know, this conversation came up, haven't had any conversations with any of my male colleagues about things that infect them, and that's wrong. We definitely need to open up these conversations.
I think you can see, I mean, within society, people have really got behind menopause in the last few years. You know, it's been talked about openly on TV. We've had documentaries. You know, Davina did a really good series around the menopause, and I think all of those things help it break down. And the hope is, I guess, is small starts. If we start to talk about it as a company, hopefully others start to talk about it, and others are talking about it, and hopefully we can have the same effect as what has happened on menopause with things like, you know, men's health.
Absolutely, I think that's really critical and really important. So Gillian, if we bring you in and just think about it from a health and safety standpoint, therefore, for a minute, what are the risks when men don't feel that they're able to seek help or disclose their symptoms at work?
So I think that the stress and anxiety and the mental strain which comes with incontinence, that can lead to obviously reduced concentration and focus on the task. And obviously that's going to increase the risk of errors and accidents, especially in safety critical roles. So I work within the energy industry, and part of that is the offshore environment. If you think about the shift patterns, sharing cabins and bathrooms, so there's less privacy to deal with health issues that you don't necessarily want everybody else to know about. There's also things like all-in-one coveralls and heavy PPE. That just means dealing with incontinence just that wee bit more difficult. And I think if we can reduce some of that anxiety by improving the environment that men with incontinence are working within, by putting things in place to help them with their concerns, then that will help with the lack of concentration and the focus on the task.
Yeah, all really important, and thank you for sharing that, Gillian. So Paul, if I can come back to you, we often hear that there's myths about men's bladder health. What are some of the most common misconceptions that you come across, and what actually is the reality around that?
So I think the biggest myth is that bladder problems are a women's issue. If you watch commercial television, I would almost guarantee that you'll see an advert on about female incontinence in the course of an evening. You hardly ever see anything about male incontinence, although that is getting better, to be fair. But as we've heard, bladder issues are pretty common in men too, especially as we get older. And frequency, that's the need to pee more often. That's the commonest symptom. And as men get older, they often have to get up at night to pass water because their prostates have enlarged. That's the usual reason for it. But frequency, that having to go more often and particularly having to get up at night, isn't specific to prostate problems. And especially if it's combined with other symptoms like feeling very thirsty or losing weight, can be an indication of other conditions like diabetes. So if you have symptoms, don't just assume, oh, it's just my prostate getting bigger. That's part of getting older as a man. If you've got symptoms down below, as we used to say, then go and get them checked out.
And that is really, really important, and a message that I think we need to keep repeating today, that always get checked out, because you just don't know what's causing these things, do you? It really resonates with me that male incontinence products, I like you, I would say yes, I've definitely seen those adverts for women, but I can't think of ever having seen that, if I'm honest, for men, and that's definitely something that should be changed. So just building on that and those products, Laura, what practical changes do workplace faces when it comes to facilities and the disposal of those incontinence products? How can we and other organisations improve hygiene infrastructure and ensure that there's that real dignity for our employees?
Thank you. So since 1992, there has been the workplace health and safety regulations state, so that's 33 years now, isn't it, if my maths is correct, that there has to be provision in a washroom for people to be able to dispose safely of their sanitary products and dispose of it through the correct waste streams. think we've had that legislation in place for so long, and it isn't legislation that we have to have provision across all washrooms for all people, male, female, gender neutral toilets. But I do feel like, at what point are we going to get to that point where it becomes mandatory to make that provision in the workplace for all employees? And I think from a practical point of view, the 1990 Environmental Protection Act stated that you have to have the provision for the feminine hygiene units to prevent and prohibit incorrect things being flushed down the toilets as well. So I think in a workplace setting, from our point of view, I think what we're working towards now is trying to make it the minimum standard to have a provision in every type of washroom, accessible, male and female, so that anyone, visitors, customers, employees, all get the same standard from one washroom to another, no matter where they are.
I think that's really, really important, Laura. And that's perhaps something, again, I'm reflecting in my role as growth director. We often are bidding on workplace contracts where we're asked to provide those facilities, but it is always in the women's facilities. And actually, we have a responsibility to go back to our clients and offer for that to be more widespread and to go into the male facilities as well. So that's certainly something that I'll consider taking away and challenging and having those conversations with our clients, because I think that's important. So Jason, from that perspective, from an HR perspective then, what practical policies can HR teams implement to reduce the stigma and better support those that are affected?
Yeah, good question. As I previously mentioned, we are looking to introduce a policy. So that's really not just only going to tackle this issue from a practical point of view, but it's also going to give sort of supporting guidance for managers as well to have those conversations. Because quite often, you know, when the individual comes to the manager, they've already gone to their GB, so they sort of understand the issues, you know, and what's going on and getting treatment there. But it's more around the practical steps, I think, from a policy wise of what we can do, remembering that this is a big step, you know, for the colleague to come forward in this way. So we need to be sympathetic, you know, listen with an open mind, and look to see what we can do, not only as a company, but also as a site. So we've already started and introduced all of our retail stores across the estates, you know, where we stock female sanitary products. We are now stocking male sanitary products as well, so that, you know, we you know, that's hopefully seen as a positive, and actually there is access in the day if someone, you know, has, you know, not brought in what they needed, to actually go and get that support as well. But I think the main thing around things like policies is let's give a framework in something that actually enables our managers to feel confident to talk about the subject, know where they can go, and also enables the employee to feel confident, again going back to that trust, to come forward as well.
That's really nice to hear that we're making that adjustment in our retail outlets and actually making those products available, which is fantastic. But Gillian, what other realistic adjustments in the workplace, sort of from a design and features perspective, can help create a more supportive environment, as well as doing things like we've taken that action in retail?
Yep. So there's a few simple steps I think employers can take to provide a more supportive environment. You could integrate continence awareness into a broader health and wellbeing programme. This will help to normalise the issue and provide more supportive environment, and reduce the stigma, like we were talking about earlier. You know, we see this happening with female incontinence, bladder incontinence, and the menopause, and just that normalisation brings people closer together. They don't feel so excluded and like they're the only one. And I think that's really important for people's mental health. So on that continence awareness topic, look out for Step Change Safety's campaign coming soon. As Laura spoke about, we should all be providing bins for sanitary incontinence waste in all toilets, not just in ladies' toilets. And I think it's important that we make incontinence products easily accessible. You know, in ladies' toilets, you often get these little baskets providing period products, that could easily be replicated for men, for having the product themselves, a bag to put waste into, and then the bins, as I said earlier, and in an environment where people have to wear uniforms or coveralls and PPE, I think it's important that one size doesn't fit all. We need to ask individuals what suits them best for what they need.
That's fantastic. And actually what I'm hearing here is there's not anything really of great significance. Each of those things you've talked about are fairly simple, fairly straightforward, and fairly easy to do. So absolutely something we should be embracing. So Paul, finally, I just want to come to you with one last question, because ultimately Compass Group, we're a catering company. It's definitely a huge part of our DNA. So how can diet and nutrition, how can we bring this in through our offers in our catering? How can actually that diet and nutrition play a role in supporting good bladder health and preventing some of these issues?
So simple lifestyle changes can make an enormous difference to incontinence. So the first one is to reduce your intake of caffeine and alcohol. Both caffeine and alcohol are diuretics. They have a diuretic effect. What that means is they stimulate the body to produce more urine. So if you cut back on alcohol and caffeine, you'll reduce the need to pee as often, and therefore your chances of leakage are going to go down. Having said that, make sure you drink plenty of other fluids though, because if you get dehydrated, that can cause a whole range of health problems, including increasing the risk of bladder infection. And of course, if you get a bladder infection, that's going to worsen your incontinence. So cut down on the booze and the caffeine, not cut them out completely, but cut down on them, but make sure you drink plenty of simple fluids like water. The other way that you can alter your lifestyle is maintain a healthy weight. And of course, the diet that we provide for our people and for our customers is important there, and stopping smoking. If you're overweight, that puts pressure on the bladder and the pelvic floor muscles, and both of those increase the chance of leakage. If you smoke, that stimulates coughing, and that sudden increased pressure on the bladder often leads to leaks. So cut out the fags and maintain a healthy weight.
Fantastic. Some really good tips and hints there. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think the perception is probably I should drink less, but your point about making sure you keep your fluids up, I think, is a really important one. Look, it's been some great conversation today, but before we wrap up, what we wanted to do was to bring in some of the voices from our wider community. So we've asked some of our employees, our clients and our customers to submit their questions for you guys as a panel, and we've had some really thoughtful submissions. So we're going to move to a bit of a quick fire question and answer session, and I will sort of aim it at one of you in particular, but please feel free to jump in and share your own thoughts as well. So Jason, the first question, and these have come from from the people externally, as I said, in our wider community. So the first question is, I'm worried about asking for support. How can I raise the issue with my manager without feeling embarrassed?
Yeah, I think that's, again, a very good question. And the way I look at this, we will obviously, like I said, have a policy in place. So hopefully, from equipping our managers, etc., to be able to have a conversation will be there. However, I think quite often, we're all human. I think quite often the fear we build up in our own minds doesn't match the reality. Fear exists really in our thoughts of the future, what might happen, as a product of our imagination. So all I would say is, if you feel like you need to have that conversation with your manager to get some help and support in the workplace, be comfortable and confident that, you can have that that conversation with your manager. And then actually on the back of that, you will get some real support.
I think that's really important. And I think equally, if you've got a trusted colleague, perhaps that you're happy to talk to, maybe get them to have a conversation with them initially and get them to give you a bit of support, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think encouraging those conversations is what's important.
Yeah, we just kind of reiterate again on that, Diana. We have, we've got the Wellbeing magazine. We're going to have posters, so there's going to be links with QR codes on those items. So, again, people will be able to use that QR code to go and access some good leaflets with some more information on those things. So again, I would advocate, even if it doesn't have to be the workplace, you might be living with someone outside of work, friends, etc. Use those materials. They give a good bit of information. You can share that with your friends as well. So and then help spread the message more.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jason. So Paul, again, I'm going to try and get back to quick fire questions here. I think I'm failing as a host. Are bladder leaks only an issue for older men?
No, they become more likely as you get older, but leaks can affect men of any age. And of course, as we've heard already, if a younger man has problems with bladder leakage, then the impact on other things like their mental health is even more profound. So any age, not just us oldies.
Okay, fantastic. And Paul, I'm sticking with you. Those lifestyle and dietary changes that you touched on earlier, can they actually really make a difference?
Yes, they can. We've spoken about caffeine and alcohol and smoking and keeping a healthy weight. But the other thing you can do is pelvic floor exercises. Those can help too. And we haven't got time to go into those now. But if people want to look up online, Google, whatever they want to use for their search engine, Kegel, Kegel exercises, that'll tell them how to do them. They're simple to do and they make a real difference.
Brilliant. Kegel exercises. I've made a note of that. Thank you. Gillian, what adjustments can my workplace realistically provide?
So I think we need to raise awareness to bring continence awareness into broader health and wellbeing programs to help to normalise the issue and reduce stigma. There are all of these provisions, I think, are relatively easy and not expensive. You can provide bins for sanitary incontinence in sanitary and incontinence waste in all toilets, not just in female toilets, and make incontinence products easily accessible. Consider maybe putting these dignity baskets with incontinence products in all toilets.
Perfect, thank you. I think, Laura, Gillian's probably summarised quite well some of the things that you might add to this, but there's another question here about what workplaces can do to ensure facilities are equipped for men managing incontinence and to maintain that dignity and hygiene. So if there's anything you'd like to add to what Gillian's just said.
I think I'll carry on from where Gillian's left off. I think in a workplace setting, it's legislation to have the provision of feminine hygiene, and however you get your waste collected, whether it be through a supplier or it's a DIY job, you order a bin off Amazon, you put a basket in a toilet. We do vending machines that dispense products in boxes, the refills. We do the Free Vend Flex now, where it just dispenses single products and they can be configured for male and female period dignity products. And I think in the workplace as well, following on from, I think a lot of people have touched on it today, I think the biggest thing is raising that awareness and giving people the space to be vulnerable in the workplace. One of the best things about the relationship I have in my team is we all have that space to be really vulnerable with each other. And I think if we all can keep building on that in workplaces, I know that's easier said than done. But I think the more we talk about it and the more we normalise it, the more natural it'll become to have these conversations. So have a look at your provision, get an expert in just to say, look, these are the products that we can do. And then it's not one size necessarily fits all as well, depending on the scale of your business, the number of people you employ that are male and female. Needs change. Some solutions can be fairly short term. I mean, we've talked a lot about the in-depth medical conditions today that can drive male incontinence, but some can be more short term, things like irritable bowel syndrome. If you're under a high amount of stress, sometimes it can be a very, very short term thing. So it's just something to think about.
Brilliant, thank you. And that sort of leads quite nicely into the next question that's come in. So for Paul, if I can aim this to you, how do I know if I need medical treatment versus self-management?
So there's no easy answer to that, Dana, but there are a few red flags that indicate that you should go and get professional advice sooner rather than later. And there are 4 of those I would highlight. The first is if you have other symptoms like pain, bleeding, excessive thirst, or loss of weight. The second one is if you're in one of those higher risk groups that I spoke about earlier. In other words, you've got a family history of prostate cancer, or you've black ethnicity, or you're under 50 and getting these sort of symptoms. The third one is if your symptoms are worsening or interfering with your lifestyle. And the last one, which is a bit of a catch-all, I suppose, is if you're just worried about what's going on, go and get it sorted out. Don't just sit there getting more and more worried.
Yeah, I think that's really critical. To be fair, Paul, if in doubt, just go and talk to somebody. They'll be more than happy to have that conversation with you. So I think that's really good to encourage people. So Jason, are there resources or services I can access confidentially through work?
Yeah, I mean, we've got the Employee Assistance Programme. So for those who are not familiar, it's a programme that's available at all. It's confidential, obviously, to that individual, but it provides a wide range of services. So if anybody wants some advice, that might be on top of what their GP is, or, whatever the situation is, they can go and use the Employee Assistance Programme. And also, depending on the circumstances of the condition, it might be that, from an employer point of view, we want to get some occupational health support to know what more we can do and how we can assist. So we also have that facility as well. Once, that conversation has taken place and once we can see, right, do we need some more further advice? So again, we can use those.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. And Gillian, we've got one last question that's come in, and that is, how can we reduce jokes or stigma around male incontinence in team culture and help colleagues to be supportive without making someone feel singled out?
Yeah, I think it's about normalizing the issue. As we've spoken about earlier, we've seen in the past few years how this can happen with other medical conditions like menopause, and that is openly discussed nowadays. It's even joked about in a healthy way. Within men and women will joke about that, and they're interested in it. And I think if we normalize incontinence, then that allows people to feel like they're part of a group and not feel like they're the only one.
So look, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. It's been really interesting for me, and I've certainly learned quite a lot about this subject. So I want to just start by thanking everyone who submitted questions in. I think these really show how important and relevant this conversation is, and that's something that we definitely need to keep going. I'd like to take a huge thank you to all of you as our panel. You've given your time and your expertise and your personal stories as well today. So thank you for that. Hopefully we've really helped to open up a topic that often stays hidden and encourage more people to feel confident about seeking that support that they need. Before we finish, I'd like to reiterate some key messages that we've learned about male incontinence. It's common, it's across all age groups, but it is manageable and there is support and help out there. The stigma and silence often worsens the problem. So let's open up those conversations to make sure that we're helping everybody. Workplaces can make a difference through policies, culture, facilities, nutrition advice, and occupational health support. And lastly, I suppose, a call to action for you. Whether you're an individual, a manager, a policymaker, please take one step forward to raise awareness in your workplace, signpost to resources, review your policies and facilities, and most of all, to ensure that you create an environment where everybody feels comfortable to ask for support when they need it. Paul, I know you have contributed to a feature which is coming out in our Autumn Wellness magazine. If anybody would like to sign up for that, then please do so. There's also our webinars, and if you just email to ess.wellness@compass-group.co.uk, you can access that resource as well. So huge thank you to all of you. It's been great to host this today, and hope everyone enjoys this.